everything. Plus, there's the perjury investigation now. Marcus's best bet is to agree to terms, sign the papers, and hope the DA decides not to prosecute. Will they? Prosecute, I mean. Patricia shrugged. Hard to say. It depends on a lot of factors. But even if they don't, the threat of it is powerful leverage right now. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it and felt my stomach drop. A text from Marcus. We need to talk, please. I showed it to Patricia, who frowned. Don't respond. Anything you say to him now could potentially be used later. All communication should go through me. I nodded and put the phone away, but the message stayed with me. Part of me, the part that had loved him once, that had believed in us, wanted to respond. Wanted to ask why. Why had he thrown away 12 years? Why had he been willing to destroy me to cover his own sins? Why hadn't I been enough? But I knew those questions had no satisfying answers. People like Marcus didn't think like that. To him, this had probably all been justified somehow. He'd wanted something else, someone else, and he'd been willing to do whatever it took to get it. My feelings had simply been collateral damage. Sarah, Patricia said gently, pulling me from my thoughts. I know this is overwhelming, and I know that even though you caught him, even though you're going to come out of this okay financially, it still hurts. That's normal. You're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling. I nodded, not trusting my voice. But I need you to focus for a few more hours. We're almost to the finish line. After today, you'll never have to see Marcus again unless you choose to. You can start rebuilding your life on your terms. What about Jennifer? I asked suddenly. The woman he was talking to. Will she face any consequences? Patricia shook her head. Unfortunately, having an affair isn't illegal. She didn't lie to the court, and she's not married to you. Morally reprehensible? Absolutely. Legally actionable? Not really. I'd looked Jennifer up, of course. After finding the recording, I'd done what any person in the digital age would do. I'd stalked her social media. She was younger than me, not by much, maybe 5 years. Pretty in a conventional way, with long blonde hair and a fondness for posting inspirational quotes about living authentically and following your heart. The irony of that, given that she was sleeping with a married man, had not been lost on me. What had surprised me was that she didn't look particularly special. I don't know what I'd expected. Some femme fatale, perhaps. Someone so extraordinary that I could understand why Marcus had been willing to risk everything. But she just looked normal, which somehow made it worse. He hadn't left me for someone better. He'd left me for someone different. And that said everything about Marcus and nothing about me. At 1:45 p.m., we returned to the courtroom. Marcus and Brennan were already there, their body language suggesting they'd been in intense negotiation. Brennan's usual polish was gone, his tie was loosened, and he looked exhausted. When Judge Morrison took the bench, she looked between the two parties. Have we reached a settlement? Brennan stood. We have, Your Honor. Mr. Whitmore agrees to the following terms. A 60-40 division of all marital assets in Mrs. Whitmore's favor, with Mrs. Whitmore retaining the family home. Mr. Whitmore will also cover all of Mrs. Whitmore's legal fees and court costs. In addition, Mr. Whitmore agrees to pay Mrs. Whitmore $50,000 as compensation for emotional distress caused by his dishonesty. I felt tears spring to my eyes. It was more than I'd dared hope for. Ms. Chen? Judge Morrison asked. My client accepts these terms, Your Honor. Very well. I'll sign the decree today. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, you are officially divorced. Mr. Whitmore, I hope you've learned something from this experience, though I rather doubt it. You are a cautionary tale about what happens when people treat marriage as a game to be won rather than a partnership to be honored. She looked at me, and her expression softened slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, I wish you the best. You deserve better than what you've been through. The gavel fell one final time. It was over. The days following the divorce hearing passed in a strange blur. I'd expected to feel triumphant, victorious even. And there was some of that, when I thought about Marcus's face as his lies crumbled around him, when I signed the papers that made the house solely mine, when I received the check that represented a new beginning. But more than triumph, I felt exhausted. 12 years of marriage doesn't dissolve cleanly, even when it ends definitively. Every room in the house held memories. The kitchen where I'd accidentally left my phone recording. The kitchen where we'd cooked together on Saturday mornings, where he'd kissed me goodbye on our first anniversary, where we'd talked about maybe having children someday. The living room where we'd curled up to watch movies. The bedroom where I'd cried myself to sleep so many nights over the past 2 years, knowing something was wrong, but unable to prove it. My sister Rachel had flown in from Portland 2 days after the hearing. She'd been after me to leave Marcus for months, had seen through his charm long before I'd been ready to acknowledge the truth. "I'm not saying I told you so," she said, sprawled across my couch with a glass of wine, "but I absolutely told you so." "You're helpful," I said dryly, though I was smiling. Having her there made the house feel less empty, less haunted by the ghost of my failed marriage. "What I want to know," Rachel said, sitting up, "is how you managed to accidentally record that conversation. That's some next-level divine intervention right there." I'd thought about that a lot over the past week. "I don't know if I believe in divine intervention," I said slowly, "but I do think maybe I left it recording on purpose, subconsciously. Like part of me knew I needed proof, and I created an opportunity to get it without having to admit to myself what I was doing." "You think you knew he'd come home and make that call?" "No, but I knew he was lying about something. And I think part of me was always listening, always looking for proof. That day, I left my phone in the kitchen and went upstairs where I'd be able to hear him come home without him seeing me immediately. That wasn't an accident. I set up the perfect scenario for overhearing something incriminating, and the recording just captured it all." Rachel considered this. "So you're saying your subconscious is smarter than his lawyer? I can accept that." I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. His lawyer is currently rethinking his career choices, I'm sure. The story had gotten out, of course. In the age of social media and courthouse gossip, something that dramatic couldn't stay contained. I'd been warned by Patricia that there might be media interest, and sure enough, my inbox was full of interview requests from local news stations and even a few national outlets. One tabloid had offered me $10,000 for an exclusive interview. I declined them all. This wasn't a story I wanted to sell. It was my life, my pain, my brief moment of vindication. Letting strangers pick through it for entertainment felt like a betrayal of myself. But I couldn't control what other people said, and the court proceedings were public record. Within a week, the story had been picked up by several online outlets. Woman's accidental recording exposes husband's affair and courtroom lies. Divorce court disaster. Man's own words convict him of fraud. The phone recording that changed everything. The comment sections were predictably mixed. Some people praised me for my resourcefulness. Others questioned the legality of the recording, even though the judge had ruled it admissible. A few blamed me for not being a good enough wife, suggesting that if I'd been more attentive, Marcus wouldn't have strayed. Those comments stung, even though I knew they came from people who understood nothing about my situation. The worst were the ones that turned me into some kind of vengeful hero, as if I'd masterminded the entire thing as an elaborate revenge scheme. "She knew exactly what she was doing," one comment read. "She set him up perfectly. Cold-blooded, but brilliant." I wasn't cold-blooded. I was just someone who'd been hurt deeply and who'd finally, accidentally, stumbled upon the proof I'd needed to be believed. 3 weeks after the hearing, I was finally ready to start sorting through Marcus's things. He'd been allowed to come by one afternoon while I was intentionally out to collect his personal belongings, but there were still remnants of his presence everywhere. A jacket in the hall closet, his favorite coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, books on the shelves that I'd never read but that he'd loved. I was boxing up a collection of his old business magazines when I found it, a small velvet jewelry box tucked behind a row of books. My heart sank even before I opened it. Inside was a ring, a diamond engagement ring, beautiful and expensive, and not the one he'd given me 12 years ago. It was meant for Jennifer. Had to be. Maybe he'd been planning to propose after the divorce was final. Maybe he'd already proposed, and this was a replacement for a lost ring or an upgrade. I didn't know, and I realized I didn't want to know. I took a photo of it with my phone and texted Patricia. "Found something. What should I do with it?" Her response came quickly. "Keep it. Purchased with marital funds, presumably. Have it appraised. It's yours." The ring sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days. I'd walk past it, pick it up, look at it, put it down. It represented everything Marcus had been planning while he'd been sleeping next to me, eating meals with me, lying to me. This ring was proof that his affair hadn't been just physical. He'd been planning a future with someone else while still married to me. Finally, I took Rachel's advice and had it appraised. The jeweler, a kind elderly man with a thick accent, examined it carefully. "Beautiful piece," he said. "Very fine quality diamond, worth approximately $8,000 retail. I can give you $5,000 for it if you're looking to sell." I thought about it. $5,000 was nothing to sneeze at. But something about selling it felt wrong, like I'd be profiting from Marcus's betrayal in a way that made me complicit in it somehow. "No," I heard myself say, "but thank you for the appraisal." I took the ring home, put it back in its velvet box, and placed it in the back of my closet. Someday, I'd decide what to do with it. Maybe I'd have it reset into something completely different, transform it from a symbol of Marcus's betrayal into something that belonged only to me. Or maybe I'd donate it to a charity auction. Or maybe it would stay in the back of my closet forever, a small, expensive reminder of everything I'd escaped. A month after the divorce was finalized, I went back to work. I'd taken a leave of absence during the worst of the proceedings, unable to focus on spreadsheets and client meetings while my life was falling apart. My boss, a wonderful woman named Margaret, who'd been through her own difficult divorce years earlier, had been understanding. "Take the time you need," she'd said. "When you're ready to come back, we'll be here." Returning felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I was good at my job. I was an accountant for a mid-sized firm, and I'd built a reputation for being thorough and reliable. At work, I wasn't Marcus's betrayed wife or the woman from that courtroom recording that had gone semi-viral. I was just Sarah Whitmore, CPA, someone who was valued for her skills and her mind. On my second day back, I was in the break room making coffee when a colleague named David approached me. We'd worked together for years, but had never been particularly close. Friendly, but not friends. "Sarah," he said, a bit awkwardly, "I just wanted to say, I heard about your divorce. I'm sorry you went through that, but also the way you handled it. That took real courage." I felt my cheeks flush. I don't know about courage. I had to prove the truth. "That's exactly what courage is," he said simply. "Standing up for the truth, even when everyone doubts you. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that a lot of us here are really proud of how you handled yourself." It was such a small moment, but it meant more than he probably realized. For so long, I'd felt isolated in my knowledge of Marcus's affair, like I was the only one who could see what was really happening. Having someone acknowledge that I'd been right, that I'd been brave, felt like a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was still raw. That evening, I came home to my quiet house and, for the first time, didn't feel the crushing weight of loneliness that had been my constant companion. The house was mine. My life was mine. And slowly, painfully, I was beginning to figure out who Sarah Whitmore was when she wasn't defined by her relationship to Marcus. 6 months after the divorce, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, the one Marcus and I had never gone to together, which had made it a sanctuary during the worst months. I had my laptop open, ostensibly working on a freelance project I'd taken on, but mostly I was people watching and thinking about how much my life had changed. The house was truly mine now, in a way that went beyond legal documents. I'd repainted the bedroom a soft sage green that Marcus would have hated. I'd replaced the living room furniture with pieces I'd chosen myself, based on what I liked rather than what matched his aesthetic. I'd planted a garden in the backyard, something I'd always wanted to do, but that Marcus had vetoed because he didn't want to deal with the maintenance. The changes were small, but they mattered. Everyone was a declaration of independence, a small rebellion against the woman I'd been when I was trying to be the wife Marcus wanted. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Thought you'd want to know. DA declined to prosecute Marcus for perjury. Insufficient resources, apparently. But he's still got the divorce judgment on his record. Small victories." I'd expected that, honestly. Perjury cases were rarely prosecuted in family court unless the lies were egregious enough to warrant criminal attention. Marcus had lied, absolutely, but in the grand scheme of what the district attorney's office dealt with, it probably seemed minor. Still, the divorce judgment was public record. Anyone who looked into Marcus's background, future romantic partners, potential employers, curious friends, would be able to see the settlement terms and draw their own conclusions about what had happened. That was its own form of accountability. Another text, this one from Rachel. Coffee date Saturday? I'm bringing someone I want you to meet. I smiled. Rachel had been trying to set me up with various friends and acquaintances for months, convinced that the best way to get over a bad relationship was to jump into a good one. I'd resisted so far, not ready to trust anyone with my heart again. But maybe? Just coffee, I texted back. No pressure. Deal. His name is Alex. He's a teacher, recently divorced, has a daughter, very kind, loves dogs. You'll like him. I probably wouldn't like him, not romantically. I wasn't ready for that. But maybe I could be ready for a friend. For someone who understood what it was like to have a marriage fall apart. For a connection that wasn't built on lies and manipulation. As I packed up my laptop to head home, a woman approached my table. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with nervous energy and a tentative smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm so sorry to bother you. But are you Sarah Whitmore? From the court case?" My stomach tightened. This had happened a few times over the past months. Strangers who recognized me from the news coverage or social media. Usually, I politely declined to engage and made a quick exit. But something about this woman's expression stopped me. "Yes," I said carefully. "That's me." "I'm Emma," she said. "I know this is weird, but I wanted to thank you. My boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend now, he'd been gaslighting me for months, making me think I was crazy for suspecting he was cheating. I saw your story, and it gave me the courage to trust my instincts. I looked through his computer when he was out, and I found everything. Messages, photos, plans he was making with someone else. I confronted him, and he tried to tell me I'd invaded his privacy, that I was controlling. But I didn't back down. I left him. And it was because of you, because I saw that sometimes we're not crazy. Sometimes we're right." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Emma, I'm so sorry you went through that, but I'm glad you got out." "I am too," she said. "It's been hard, but it's better than staying with someone who was making me doubt my own mind. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that what you did mattered. Not just for you, but for people like me who needed to see someone stand up for the truth." After Emma left, I sat for a long time in the coffee shop, her words echoing in my mind. I'd been so focused on my own pain, my own healing, that I hadn't really considered that my story might have meaning beyond my personal experience. But maybe it did. Maybe something good could come from all that hurt. The Saturday coffee date with Alex turned out to be surprisingly pleasant. He was indeed kind, with an easy laugh and an obvious devotion to his daughter Lily, who he showed me pictures of with unabashed pride. We talked about books and teaching and the weirdness of being single in your 30s after years of marriage. There was no romantic spark, at least not for me, but there was something better. Genuine connection with someone who understood. "Can I ask you something?" Alex said over his second cup of coffee. "How did you know when you were ready to start dating again? Or are you even ready?" "I'm not sure I am," I admitted. "But I think I'm getting close. How about you?" He shrugged. "Some days I think I'm ready. Other days, the thought of trusting someone that much again feels impossible. My ex-wife didn't cheat, but she was unkind, critical. She made me feel like I was never enough, no matter what I did. And even though I know intellectually that not everyone is like that, emotionally," he trailed off. "Emotionally, you're still protecting yourself," I finished. "Exactly." We exchanged numbers, made vague plans to meet up again, maybe as a group with Rachel and her partner. It felt safe, friendly, uncomplicated. Maybe that was what I needed right now, to remember that connection didn't have to be fraught with suspicion and pain, that people could be kind and honest. A year after the divorce, I was ready to make a major change. I'd been promoted at work, was financially stable for the first time in years, and had slowly built a life that felt authentically mine. But the house, despite all my renovations and reclaiming, still held too many ghosts. I put it on the market, and within 3 weeks, had an offer that exceeded my asking price. The real estate market had been good to me in one of those small ironies of fate. Marcus had fought so hard to keep this house, and now I was selling it for a significant profit that would be entirely mine. I found a smaller place, a townhouse in a neighborhood I'd always loved but that Marcus had deemed too far from his office. It had a small patio perfect for my gardening hobby, an extra room I could use as a home office, and absolutely no memories of Marcus. On moving day, as I was doing a final walkthrough of the old house, I found one last remnant, a photo album I'd somehow missed in all my previous cleanouts. I opened it to find pictures from our early years together. Us at the beach, laughing. At our wedding, looking genuinely happy. On various vacations, younger versions of ourselves who still believed in forever. Looking at those photos, I felt a complicated swirl of emotions. Anger at Marcus for throwing it all away. Sadness for the woman I'd been who had trusted so completely. But also, surprisingly, gratitude. Not for Marcus, he didn't deserve my gratitude, but for the experience itself. I'd learned things about myself in the crucible of this divorce. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could stand up for myself even when everyone doubted me, that I could survive being betrayed by someone I loved and come out the other side, not just intact, but better. I left the photo album in the empty house, let the new owners find it or throw it away. Those memories weren't mine anymore. They belonged to a different Sarah, one who existed in a different time. 3 years after the divorce, I ran into Marcus at a bookstore. It was inevitable in a city this size that we'd eventually cross paths, but I'd somehow managed to avoid it until that moment. I was browsing the fiction section when I looked up and saw him 2 aisles over. He looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and he'd gained weight. He was alone, and something about his posture suggested he was lonely. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old attraction, the muscle memory of 12 years together. Then he saw me, and his expression cycled through shock, shame, and something that might have been regret. He started to approach me, stopped, then continued more slowly. "Sarah," he said quietly. "Hi." "Marcus." An awkward pause. "What do you say to someone who tried to destroy you? What do you say to someone you once loved more than anyone in the world?" "How are you?" he asked finally. "I'm good," I said, and realized it was true. Really good, actually. He nodded, accepting this. "I heard you sold the house, moved to North Park." "I did. And you?" "Living downtown. Smaller place. It's fine." Another pause. "Sarah, I wanted to apologize. For everything. For how I handled things. For the lies. You didn't deserve any of that." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, the old Marcus who could make lies sound like truth. But he just looked tired and sincere. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that. Are you seeing anyone?" It was an inappropriate question, given our history, but I answered anyway. "Yes, actually. For about 6 months now. He's a good man." This was true. Alex and I had reconnected about a year after that first coffee date, and something had shifted. We'd taken things slowly, both of us careful with our battle-scarred hearts. But it was real and healthy and honest in a way my marriage to Marcus never had been. Marcus's face fell slightly. "That's good. You deserve someone good." "And you?" I asked, not sure why I wanted to know, but asking anyway. "Did things work out with Jennifer?" He shook his head. "Lasted about 8 months after the divorce. Turns out when a relationship starts with lies and betrayal, it doesn't have a strong foundation." Who knew? The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Not for him specifically, but for the waste of it all. "Are you?" He looked at me searchingly. "Sorry?" I considered this. "I'm sorry that you threw away something real for something that wasn't. I'm sorry that you hurt people. But I'm not sorry about how things ended, if that's what you're asking. What you did, it hurt. But it also freed me. I'm happier now than I've been in years." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'm glad. You were always too good for me, Sarah. I just couldn't admit it, even to myself." We stood there for another moment. 2 people who had once promised forever, and who had learned that sometimes forever has an expiration date. Then Marcus picked up the book he'd been holding, some thriller with an embossed cover, and gave me a small, sad smile. "Take care of yourself, Sarah." "You too, Marcus." I watched him walk away, out of the bookstore and out of my life for what I suspected would be the final time. And I realized that the sight of him leaving didn't hurt anymore. That chapter was closed, and I had no desire to reopen it. 5 years after the divorce, I stood in my kitchen. Not the kitchen where I'd accidentally recorded Marcus's confession, but a new kitchen in a new home in a new chapter of my life, and thought about how one accidental recording had changed everything. I'd just gotten off the phone with a journalist who was writing a piece about legal precedents in divorce cases. My case, it turned out, had been cited in 3 subsequent California divorce proceedings where secret recordings had been admitted as evidence. I'd inadvertently helped create case law that would help other people prove the truth when their partners were lying. Emma, the young woman who'd approached me in the coffee shop years ago, had stayed in touch. She was now engaged to someone new, someone who treated her with respect and honesty. She'd sent me an invitation to her wedding, which I'd accepted with genuine joy for her. Rachel was visiting for the weekend, and we were planning to cook dinner together, a tradition we'd maintained even after she'd moved back to Portland. Alex was coming over later with Lily, who at 12 was at that perfect age where she was old enough to have real conversations, but young enough to still think her dad was cool. We weren't married, Alex and I, and might never be. Neither of us felt the need for that particular piece of paper after our first marriages had ended so badly. But we were building something stable and real, and that was enough. As I chopped vegetables for the stir-fry Rachel was insisting we make, I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago, suspicious, hurting, doubting her own perceptions. If I could go back and talk to her, what would I say? I'd tell her that her instincts were right, that she wasn't crazy or paranoid, that the truth would come out, though in a way she never expected. I'd tell her that the pain she was feeling wouldn't last forever, that she'd build a life beyond Marcus, beyond the lies, beyond the betrayal. I'd tell her that accidentally leaving her phone recording that day would be the best mistake she ever made. But most of all, I'd tell her what I finally understood now, that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to the best thing that could have happened. That endings, no matter how painful, are also beginnings. Marcus had tried to blame me, to paint me as the villain in our story, and for a while, it had almost worked. But in the end, the truth had won out. Not because I was particularly clever or brave, but because I'd trusted myself enough to keep looking for proof even when everyone doubted me. That recording hadn't just exposed Marcus's lies. It had validated my reality and given me back my voice. And that, I realized as Rachel opened a bottle of wine and we toasted to sisterhood and new beginnings, was worth more than any divorce settlement could ever be. The truth had set me free, and I was never going back.